Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I want to do another It's the Bread Story replay. Like I said last week, going back through the episodes reminded me of the amazing stories shared by so many, and some I had almost forgotten. I do not want any story to be forgotten, and especially not episode 63 with Emily Knox. You might want to grab a tissue, as you might just shed a tear or two. I know I did when I heard the heart cry of a mama for help for her sweet daughter, then the grateful heart of a little girl that found healing from an ugly wart. Be blessed today as you listen. I know I was when I heard it. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I am happy to share with you all yet another It's the Bread Story. I never get tired of hearing the real bread testimonies of others. It's such an encouragement to me, and I believe encourages you, the listener, as well. My guest today is Emily Knox, who is local to our Bread Becker store in Woodstock, Georgia, and actually heard about Bread Beckers from a friend many years ago, if I have this right. Mm-hmm. But something recently sparked Emily's interest to pursue this idea of making bread. But I'm going to let Emily tell you her story for herself. Emily, welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes, and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you join and tell your testimony. To begin, if you would, please share a little bit about yourself and how you first heard about Bread Beckers.
Well, thank you so much, Sue, for having me on. I can't believe that I'm talking to you because I enjoy listening to your podcast, and I have loved hearing all the bread stories, and I'm just honored that you would have me on to share mine.
Well, I think yours is worth sharing. I think they all are. So I'm just excited that you're ready to share.
Yes. Well, I am a mom of 4 kids. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. And our bread story actually starts with one of our daughters, one of our teenage daughters. And it starts a couple of years ago. When she was in late elementary school, she started having warts appear on her hands. And we would go to the dermatologist and try to see what we could do to help get rid of the warts. We had the freeze treatment done, and it might go away for a little while, and then we would see more come. And this went on for the course of about 2 years. And recently, this past summer, we were at home, and her hands were had gotten to the point to where she had about 20 warts on one of her hands. And as you can imagine, for a teenage girl, it was terribly embarrassing, and it was devastating to her. And we felt like we had done everything that we needed to do. We had been to the dermatologist multiple times over the course of the 2 years and spent a lot of money trying to figure out what to do. And one night, it was in the summer, and I remember walking away after saying goodnight to all my kids, and I heard her in her room crying, just heartbreaking cry. And I knew she was crying about being discouraged about the warts that were all over her hands. And I just remember walking away saying, God, what else can we do? Will you please heal her hands? Wow. And it was just so upsetting. As a mom, you want your kids, you would do anything to help your kids. And when you feel like, what else can I do? I don't know what else to do. You kind of get to a place to where you're willing to try anything, listen to anything. So a few days later, my husband was driving to work. He drives back and forth to Atlanta. We live, like you said, local, closer to Bread Bakers, but I didn't really know a lot about Bread Bakers. But he had heard an ad on the radio, and it was you. I think it's called Sue's Healthy Minute, and you were given a little spot about Bread Bakers, and in the commercial, you kind of talked about some of the benefits of bread, and I think maybe near the end you mentioned even warts or something.
Yes.
And so he sent me a text, but the text actually was a specific podcast from your podcast that I had never listened to before. I'd never searched or Googled anything about Bread Bakers. And the podcast just said, Sue's Healthy Minutes, wart stories. And he said under the text, he said, you need to listen to this.
Wow.
And he had not heard it either. It was just from him hearing the commercial. And I don't know how he found the episode, but somehow he texted me the episode. And so it was one of those things where, you have to have time sometimes to sit down and listen to a podcast. Yeah. And I saw it come through. I didn't do anything about it, which is funny because I just prayed saying, God, what can we do? Yeah. And here comes this podcast that I ignored, for several days. And I remember that just one morning, I think I was just doing laundry, and I said, I'm just going to turn on a podcast while I fold all these clothes. And so I went back to that podcast that he sent and turned it on, and immediately started hearing you talk about all the different testimony that you'd heard throughout your experience of, I think you even mentioned your own kids and just different stories of warts.
Yes.
And I started crying while I was folding my laundry. And one of the things that you said really stood out to me because you said, warts is a virus and we can do all these things and try to treat them topically. But if we can't figure out from the inside, what's going on. And you even asked a question in there and said, if your kids were told they had any other kind of virus, like the strep or whatever, you wouldn't be okay to just let them have it for several years and say, well, it'll go away one day or it'll be fine one day.
Right. Yes.
And I thought, that's how I feel. I mean, that has been our story. And so I finished the podcast in tears. I think my husband was at work, so I texted him back and I said, just listen to the podcast. We are doing this. And that's literally all I knew about you. That's all I knew about Bread Bakers. And you're right from my introduction that we have a mutual friend that works at your store. So I had heard her talk about Bread Bakers for years, but I always thought it was just somewhere you would go to buy fancy bread. I didn't know it was anything. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So I literally got off the phone, and for anybody that's a researcher, y'all are probably going to think I'm crazy because I got off the phone. I searched up Bread Bakers online. I called your store, and some sweet lady answered the phone, and I just said, hey, I'm just calling to find out if I can come to your shop and buy some of that bread.
Yeah.
And the sweet lady on the phone said, no, you can't buy the bread here, but we sell everything that you need to make the bread. And I thought, oh, I need to do a little bit more research on what this is. And so I went back. I kind of looked around on your website. I went back to your podcast. I went back to the very first episode that you just talked about. It's the bread, you know, and started listening to other stories that you had recorded, and was just, the more I listened, the more I was like, I want to start us on this bread right now. And so we made a trip to Bread Bakers, and this was during the time that it seemed like like the supply chain was crazy. Like y'all didn't have any meals, and everybody kept saying we're gonna get more, but we don't know when. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years. Yes, I remember.
Yes, it was a little. It was almost like after COVID, and things were just not kind of coming as quickly. And so we went out, and now just remember, we had not tasted a bite of the bread. I had no idea, really. I think I might have seen a YouTube video that you had done too, where I had a little bit more of a visual of what it was, but I really didn't know. I just wanted my daughter's warts to be gone. Yeah. And I thought, I've heard all this testimony, and I've already spent so much money at the dermatologist. And if this would be something that could help, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And so we made a trip to Breadbecker's. We bought everything that we needed to get started, minus the meal. And the first trip we were there, one of the ladies there milled some flour for us. So we took it straight home. And I think that's how we made our first loaf of bread. But I thought, I want a meal because I want to start. And I have all this wheat and I have everything I need. But how am I going to turn it? And so honestly, just a God provision to where it was just, he was just confirming, I feel like, to us, this is what I want you to do. I happened to find a meal from a lady that was selling a meal. She had bought one and just decided, I'm not going to do this. So I was able to buy one from her and got started. And this was probably, all of this happened around the 1st of August. So of last year. So this was about 9 months ago. And that's kind of how we started making the bread. Yeah. So I came home. I threw out all my store-bought flour. I love it. I threw out all the white sugar, and my kids' eyes kind of got big, like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? What's happening?
Wow. That's so much like me. I'm all in. I'm doing this.
And look at that. I hope y'all like this because we've already bought everything. Everything else is in the garbage. So here we go. But I will say that we started, and I had not been to a class. I hadn't really learned anything other than just what I had listened to on the few podcasts.
Right.
And I would say after about a week or two, we started documenting my daughter's hands. We'd take pictures and everything. And you could see physical changes to her hands, and they all of a sudden just started becoming less inflamed looking. They were getting smaller, and so
in just a week or two,
physical changes I could see were happening to her hands. And I would say, keep eating the bread. And so we would do, every meal, and for snacks, we'd have bread at every meal, we'd have snacks. And I would probably say after between 4 to 6 weeks, all the warts were gone.
Oh my.
And it was so exciting, and it was amazing, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I must have believed it enough because I went and bought everything and did it after hearing the stories. But just watching it, I thought, we have spent over 2 years and probably over $1,000. We have dipped cotton balls in apple cider vinegar. We have tried every at-home remedy. And nothing. And now after just a month on changing our diet and learning about the vitamin E and everything, they're gone. And it's amazing. And I just remember I took my daughter to get a manicure, for a teenage girl to get to finally go get a manicure because she was proud of her hands.
That's so wonderful.
It was just a moment where I thought, thank you, God, Mm-hmm. But just kind of some cool things throughout. I always tell people when I start to tell people about, well, we're eating this bread now and this is what we're doing, I'll say, well, I started the bread because of warts, but all that I've learned since and just other benefits that I've seen from my family are so cool. I mean, my husband was diagnosed years ago with Crohn's disease. And he has a very mild case, but, and Crohn's disease is something chronic that, could affect your intestines and all your digestive and all that. Yeah. And he, immediately within a few weeks noticed a huge difference with his digestive system. Yeah. And I would love to dig into that and learn more, as we're going through this journey with him.
I've heard other testimonies, had a family member that had severe Crohn's, and they all tell me that the bread is the best thing they've ever done. And, it's a misnomer that the high fiber and bran is irritating to the bowel. It is not. It's actually very, very healing.
Oh, he's loved it. And, he travels and he'll take bread with him. And when he runs out, he'll say, oh, I noticed a difference. I missed your bread. I got to come home and get some bread.
Yeah. And that's what I've heard. People say, if I eat this bread, I'm fine. If I get anything else, it'll flare up, the Crohn or even irritable bowel or whatever. Yeah.
And my son is he's in elementary school still, and he struggles with seasonal allergies, and he still does. I mean, right now during this pollen season, it has been crazy. Yeah. But one of his reactions, I guess you call it a reaction, or just what his skin's always does, he always has had the little bumps on his upper arms, kind of like maybe eczema bumps or something. But I remember probably a month or so into bread, just one night I was putting him to bed and he said, Mom, I think that bread is helping me, because he said, I don't have as many of all those little bumps on my arms, anymore. And I just was like, I'm just thankful. Like, I'm
now, how old is your son?
He is 11.
My goodness. Well, first of all, for an 11-year-old to notice and a boy to notice.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow.
That's right. But, and just even listening to all this stuff that I've heard you say and hear some of the other stories, we did go back for a follow-up to the dermatologist, and I was telling them, they asked her about the warts, and I just kind of said, hey, we came here for years. We've spent a lot of money. Y'all have done a lot of the freeze treatments, and it didn't work at all. And when I started telling them about the bread and the vitamin E, they'd never heard of that, said, well, we definitely won't dispute if something's working, that's great, but had no idea about the vitamin E. Nothing like that. And my daughter and I walked out and I just said, can you believe that? That we would learn that and they wouldn't even know when you think of how helpful it's been. And, my husband was on a flight home and he was sitting next to an endocrinologist doctor, and was talking to him, and the doctor was telling him kind of his line of work. So my husband started telling him about the bread and the vitamin E and kind of our story. And the doctor just couldn't believe it. He'd never heard of it. He had said he was going to go research it.
Oh,
and I just thought that's so wild. That is so wild to me, because my husband keeps saying, why are we just now learning about this? Why have we not known about this?
Listen, I was a food science major and graduated from the University of Georgia in 1976. And I didn't learn about this until 1991. And that was my same reaction. I was like, why didn't I know this? And even after graduating, reading and studying biochemistry and physiology and Adele Davis, I never thought about milling my own grain to make my own bread. Even though the textbooks I was reading talked about the nutrients in real whole grains, but I never put that together. So you're not alone.
Yes.
and it does amaze me. And I think you said you had actually heard about bread bakers 17 years ago.
Yes. For so long ago, our friend Sarah would say, oh, I saw so-and-so at bread bakers. And I just thought, oh, that must just be a fancy place. where you go to buy bread. I didn't know that it was something that you do, to help your family, or that it was even something that you need. And my ears didn't perk up, like I said, until you get to a point to where you're like, I've tried all these things, I've spent all this money. What else can I do? And we're so thankful for you. I'm just so thankful for just the effort that you've put into your studies and what you're putting out for people to learn. And, since I've started this, I'll share with friends, and I've actually heard different podcasts that I think, I need to share that with my friend because she has struggled with this, or another friend. And I have several that have started their bread story just since I've started mine. But what I've found is that you need to have a reason to want to get started on it. I mean, something that will drive you to say, I'm going to do this, know?
Yeah. And that was one of my questions, but you've already answered it, is what made you make this big commitment? And it was kind of desperation. Mm-hmm. And, the scripture that's just coming to my mind as I'm listening to you is, and I know it's one we quote and it's almost cliche, but that all things, God works all things together for our good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So I see even the desperation of going, because your story sounds very much like mine. My kids were young, my original wart story, going to the doctor, months and months, working and actually ending up with a screaming, very fearful child, having this pain of them picking at the warts. And then crying out. I'll never forget leaving the doctor's office that day, crying out in the car. I can't go back because that was over 40 years ago, but I know exactly what I said, but I have a feeling I was just like you, desperate. God, what else can I do? Please show me. And right in that minute, I remember the day driving home in our van, and I just saw the sentence of a book that I had been reading on vitamin E, and it said vitamin E has been known to get rid of warts. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I've got vitamin E at home. I'll just do it. And that was before bread. So I just started giving them the supplements, and within weeks, both of my kids who have warts, they were gone. And yet here I had months and months in medicine and, 2 or 3 years with the warts. And then, of course, when we started the bread and my son, who wasn't taking vitamin E, and his warts went right away, I'm like, okay, we did the richest food source of vitamin E there is, and I didn't need supplements anymore. So it was amazing. And I love what you said, too, about this is a virus. Mm-hmm. This is a virus, and we don't think about it. To us, it's just an ugly skin eruption. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a virus, and it is actually contagious. So, not necessarily by coughing and sneezing, but it is a virus. And we wouldn't let our kids live with any other type of virus, No.
Well, I praise God that he showed you and reminded you of that vitamin E that day. I do believe that there's so much more that we don't even know, the benefits of what it's going to provide and what it is providing for all of us. And I just want to say thank you to you for your ministry and for putting all this out here. And I know you've been doing it for a long time, but I'm so glad that I just found it. And I just get so excited about it. I can't help but share little loaves of bread and start telling people about it. And some people feel like that's impossible because are you in the kitchen all the time baking, or I work full time and I can't do this, but you really can. And there's lots of ways that I've kind of figured out, hey, this is a good practical way. I mean, I remember coming to your class and you told a story of how when you were homeschooling and you had all your children, kind of how you would get up and you would start your, your dough. And it almost just helped me to say, okay, I can imagine how I could do this.
Yeah. You find a rhythm, you find what works for you, and you go from there.
You do.
You got a mill and a bread machine.
I did. I got the mixer, the bread machine, the mill, everything. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just said, I want all of it because I want to be able to make it at my convenience because we're switching to this, but love the mixer. I mean, I just wouldn't want to do it without that. It's great, especially for all the kids. And I can make like a triple recipe, at a time. We have had a ball we've got both of your cookbooks. We have tried, of course, the muffins, the cinnamon rolls, the pancakes, the waffles. We tried the donuts, the crepes. I mean, it's all of it.
Oh my goodness. You sound so much like me. I just went all in. I just went, I'm doing this.
Yes. And I love when I'm at the grocery store now, I truly feel like I'll walk by the bread aisle and I will feel like I am so glad that I don't have to go fill my basket with all that bread from the bread aisle. I just didn't realize I could make all the things. I mean, the bagels, the hot dog buns, hamburger buns. Yes. Who knew that you could make all that? But you can.
I know. And it's not that hard, is it?
No.
And you're a busy mom of 4.
Yes.
And you can do it. And that's an encouraging word.
I will say for one last note I got was on my birthday this year, just a few months ago, all the kids wrote a little birthday card to me, and they were all special. I love every one of them, but just specific to this story was my oldest daughter wrote her birthday note to me, and it just said, "Thank you, Mom, for investing and sacrificing your time to make bread for me." And it was just like, that's what you do as a mom. You, like I said, you would just do anything. And when okay, we've just launched into this by faith. I felt like that God really gave us this to do. And it's just so confirming and encouraging, to say, even they realize this has made a big change and a big difference in our family.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing that she would write that. And it just makes me think of, and I don't want to put any guilt on anybody, but when we say I don't have time to do this, it's not just us that's losing. It is our family. And when we make the decision to do this, it blesses us and our children more than we can imagine.
Yes.
And would put that in words. Mm-hmm. That would be the best birthday present of all.
It was.
Loved all the other cards, but that had to have blessed you.
Yes.
Beyond words. So
totally did. So we're excited and have lots more to learn. We've definitely had some fails. It's not all been perfect.
Yes. Well, I do too. Some days you just are better than others. So
yes.
I just love your story. This is just such good news. And I wrote down on my paper here on my notes, I just have the word hope.
Yes.
I hope that your testimony brings hope to others.
I hope so too. I mean, I just want to encourage anybody listening that if they just feel like they're looking for something, they've had just, maybe they've tried all kind of things and anything they've heard or learned could help them, it's worth trying. I mean, first of all, not only is it delicious, and I think it's fun, like I said, to realize we can make this ourselves and it's even better than the store. But if you're just even thinking about it, go to a class or go listen to another episode or a YouTube video or, try it. And if you're nervous about the expense of it, I will say that God will provide that. I believe that He will. I know that He did that for us. And I also think that, like I said, we had already spent more money at the doctor, at the dermatologist. And I believe that it's really helped us and saved in the long run. I do think it's an initial investment, but it's so worth the investment long term.
Yes. And if we hear anything from your story, it's number one, He heard the cry of your daughter's heart.
Yes.
He heard your cry and He answered. And when He gives us the answer, He will provide. And
I believe that, yes.
And, I think back of one of the biggest wart stories we ever had. And I think that's the one I've shared so many times. That sounded very similar to yours. Her daughter had over 500 warts. teenager, embarrassed, wouldn't wear shorts because she had a huge patch on her leg. Came to a homeschool show where I was speaking, and the same thing. She had cried out to God, please give us. They had them all burned off, and they all came back. And it is a virus, and she met me outside my workshop after coming in there with tears just coming down her eyes, kind of like that when you listen to the podcast, and said the same thing. I've spent more money than this meal cost on one prescription drug.
Yes.
And she said, I like to cook. We have to eat. And she goes, nobody, could eat that prescription. That
right.
Got to enjoy all the trips to the doctor. But now, God's perfect provision, your whole family is enjoying it.
Yes.
And other benefits. And isn't that the way God works? It's never just isolated blessing. It always just pours out.
Yes.
And your story has just blessed me beyond what you can imagine. I'm trying to fight back the tears. I just want to thank you for sharing your story today with everyone. And I hope all of you that have listened today and have heard this have been both inspired and encouraged to start this journey. And I just want to thank you, Emily. Again, I can't tell you how much it's blessed me to hear you. And one other thing I want to say is, warts are caused by a virus. And what hit me a few years back is, if this bread can heal our bodies from a virus that we've been fighting for 2 years, 5 years, some people 10 years, what other viruses is it going to help us fight and protect us from? And that's a powerful thought today, I think. You have shared so much, but is there one last word of encouragement?
I wanted to share a journal entry that I had written. I knew I'd written it, and I went back and found it. And I hope that it encourages you too. And it encouraged me when I reread it, and I might get teary reading it, but I wrote it actually on August the 1st of this past year. So, kind of at the start of our journey. I think probably at the time I wrote this, I had bought everything, and I was probably a little scared but excited, of what was happening. But this was a prayer that I had written that I really I felt like God wanted me to write it down, and I wanted to share it with you today. And I just wrote, God, I know that you heard our daughter's heartbreaking cries over the warts all over her hands. I finally listened to the Bread Bakers podcast that Steve sent me several days earlier. I feel like that you are giving us a direction, not just with warts, but with things that we don't even know yet. Then today, several months past due, I had submitted an invoice for some contract work that I'd done. The money is supposed to arrive in the next week. And for months, I've imagined what we would do with that money, like home projects or put it toward a beach vacation. Never did I imagine maybe I'm going to spend it on a grain mill and some wheat and some honey and a bread machine. Is this how you want me to spend it, God? I'm thinking yes. And then I said, then just after tonight, I heard a worship song called Blessings. And I thought that you said to me, daughter, what if the warts are the best thing that has happened to you and your family? Wow. And I said, oh, please, God, let it be, as I was just asking you to continue to give us health. I know that you're leading in this. And so today, I want to say thanks for two hands, two beautiful, special hands full of warts, and for podcasts that you can speak through in moments of frustration, of pulling apart cotton balls and apple cider vinegar. I just want to say thank you and ask that you would continue to lead our family. And I do believe that you're leading us to do this. And that was back in August. And like I said, I do believe that there's so much more that we don't even know, the benefits of what it's going to provide and what it is providing for all of us.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Breadbeckers Incorporated located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.